So in this video, we're going to build on the parameter queries video that I've already put up. And if we take a look at the parameter query that we built last time, if we double click on the query, it brings up an enter parameter value for each of the parameters we want to specify. So if we put in here Australia, and then we put the sex as male, and then we put the min date of birth as 30th of the 12th, 1970, and this will run the query and bring up all of the entries from the table guest which meet those three criteria. Now, some of the key problems with these sort of queries are that users can quite easily put in stupid values. For example, they can put in a country of 5, they can put in a sex of 7, and they can put in a min date of birth of Australia. It will try and run that query and it will come back with an error. And a second problem with these type of queries is that you get a pop-up box for every single parameter. It can get a little bit annoying. What we're going to build in this video is a user form which we link to that parameter query so that you get one user form, it checks all of your inputs, then it runs the query for you and returns the results. And it's this query down here. I've called it form get guests. If we double click on that, we get a pop-up with the user form. We have a drop-down box for the countries, so the user can only select a sensible country. We get a drop-down box for the sex, so the user can only select a sensible sex. And we get a date picker for the min date of birth. So you can select a given min date of birth. And in this case, I'm just going to change that to 1970. Then we have a button called Run Query. When we click on that button, it runs the same query and returns the same set of results as our parameter query. We have an exit button here. When we click on the exit button, it just closes the form. And that's it. Job done. Let's get on with actually building that query and building that form. So to start with, we'll just take a quick look at the table that we're actually going to be querying in this tutorial. And it's the guest table over on the left here. If we just open that up, we can see it's got a number of fields such as a guest ID, a guest name, and various fields for the address. In particular, there's one field for the address which contains the country that the guest lives in. There's a field for the sex of the guest, and there's a field for the date of birth of the guest. Now let's take a look at the parameter query based on that table that, again, I've already built. So if we open that in Design View, we can see that it's returning the guest name, the address 3, which is actually the country, the sex, and the date of birth. And in order to filter our results, we're using the square brackets with a given name as the criteria. And this will bring up a pop-up box that will allow us to specify the value of that parameter. So we're going to filter for a given country, a given sex, and we're going to make sure that the date of birth of the guest is greater than or equal to a given chosen date. So what we'll do with the rest of this tutorial is we're going to construct a user form that allows the user in one simple form to specify all of the inputs for this parameter query and to just click OK to run that query and to generate the results. In order to allow us to build our query, I have added a couple of additional queries to our set of queries, and this is just so that we can obtain a unique set of countries that are within the guest table and a unique set of sexes that are within the guest table. And the reason for doing this is when we build our form, we're going to put in some drop-down boxes so the user can select the parameters they want from the available values. And again, this just makes sure that the user is not inputting silly values such as a country of 5. They can only input and query for country values that actually make sense. So let's take a look at one of these queries just to see how it's constructed. If we look at the query unique sexes, and we'll just open that in Design View, and we can see that it's returning the sex field from the guest table. So how do we know that it's a unique set of values that it's returning? Well, we right click and go to Properties. Then we just make sure that we click in this grey area here, and that will bring up the properties for the query. And we can see that unique values here is specified as yes. And by specifying that as yes, it makes sure that it returns only unique values instead of every single value. So let's just to make that clear, for now we're going to set it to no. Then we're going to actually run the query. When we run the query, we get, the value of male returned lots of times, the value of female returned lots of times. Let's go back to design view, then open up the properties, and what we're going to do is set unique values to yes, close that down, and again just run the query, and this time we just get one value of male, one value of female. Okay, we're going to save that and we're going to close it. Both of these queries for the unique country and the unique sexes are constructed in the same way. They just return the values from a given field, and they return the unique records of the values from that field. So the next step in this tutorial is to start to create our user form that's going to grab the values from the user for the parameters and then run the query. We do this by going to the Create tab, and then we're going to go and create a blank form. Now, there's a lot of ways that you can create things like forms and create things like controls on the forms, and there's a lot of wizards that you can use to do this. As a general rule, I tend to avoid using the wizards because often I find they are more trouble than they're worth. They create problems and they configure it in a way that you don't want it to look. That's just a personal preference. If you want to go and use a wizard, you go right ahead. For this tutorial, I'm just going to use a blank form and I'm going to add the controls without using wizards. So we click on blank form and we create this form called form 1. We want to save it and give it a sensible name. So we'll right click up here and go save, and we'll go form get guests. Very straightforward. The next thing we want to do is to modify some of the properties of this form. The first property we need to be in design view to actually modify. So in the bottom right corner here, let's click on design view. When we click on design view, we then want to bring up the properties. So we go design, property sheet. And in the properties, the one we want to modify is has module. Okay, we need this to be set to yes. Okay, close that down for now. We're going to save. And we're going to go back to layout view. As a general rule, I prefer to build these when we're in layout view. So the next thing we're going to do is start adding controls to our form. Now when we add controls, I like to make sure that we're not using wizards, and then we're just going to add blank controls and then format these as we want. So to make sure that we're not using wizards, we click on the More button here, which is the kind of downwards arrow at the bottom right of the controls, and then we just make sure that use control wizards is unchecked. Okay, so it's unselected. If you see it like this with a grey box around it, then that means that the wizards are switched on. If you see it like this without the box around it, then the wizards is switched off, and we want it switched off. So now that we've switched that off, the first thing we're going to add is a combo box. So we'll click here to add a combo box. For now it's called combo 6. We're then going to open up the property sheet and we're going to change some of the properties of this combo box. We're going to start with changing the name of it. Select the combo 6, which is the name that it's originally given. We're going to change it to CMB select country, combo box select country, and we are going to change this label, which is currently called label 7, to label select country, and we're going to change the caption to select country. And when we do that, we can see over here the text box value changes to select country. Now with user forms, one of the best way to kind of learn how to build them and get good with them is to learn about the properties of the user forms, to learn about the properties of the various controls. Now, compared to Microsoft Excel, user forms are much easier to build and access, but you do need to know the various properties that you want to change, where to find them, and what values they need to be. And in this case, we are going to change the property of our combo box for select country. Now, to do this, we go to the data tab of the property sheet, and The intuitive thing that you would think to set is the control source, but in fact, in order that we want the values in this drop-down box to be the unique countries, which is specified in this query here, we need to set the row source type to table query. Okay, and then we need to select the row source to be query unique countries. Click on save here. Let's close this down, and then let's just run this form. When we do that, the user clicks on the drop-down box and they get a set of unique countries that are available from the guest table. Okay, now the important thing to bear in mind is that the way we set that up is using these two entries here, the row source and the row source type. It is not the control source. So that's our first combo box set up. The next thing we're going to do, we're going to add a combo box for the sex that we're going to select. So let's add another combo box just underneath here. This is called combo 10. On the properties sheet, we select combo 10, and we're going to change the name of combo 10 first of all. So let's go right up to the top here, and we're going to call that CMB select sex. And for the data, we're going to make sure that it's set to table/query, and for the row source, we're going to set it to query unique sexes. We're going to change this label here. It's currently called label 11, and we're going to change the name of it to label select sex, and we're going to change the caption to select sex. Okay, again, very straightforward. The next control that we're going to insert is a text box, and there is a trick with a text box in that you can use it to bring up a date time picker if you know how to set the right properties. It's very easy, it's very convenient, it uses built-in Microsoft Access controls. This is not something that you can do very easily in Microsoft Excel, so it is a big difference. We can see here we've got the label called label 19, so we'll call this label select min date of birth, and the caption is going to be select min date of birth. And in the actual text box here, it's currently called text 18, so we're going to call this text min date of birth. And the way that we get a date time picker to pop up is we make sure that this show date picker is set for dates. Okay, so that could be set to never, but we're going to show it for dates. And then we select the format of the text box, and we're going to let it be a short date. Now, because this is set to be a short date, this will bring up a date time picker whenever a user clicks on it. So again, just to demonstrate that, let's click on form view. And when a user clicks on here, we can see the date time picker comes up. You click on that and you have a nice date time selection kind of pop-up. Nice and easy, that's exactly what we want. Let's go back to layout view. Final two things we're going to insert here are a couple of buttons which actually execute our code. So let's put in a command button here, and let's put in a command button here. This one is going to be the button that runs our queries, so we're going to call that a button run query, and the caption is going to be run query. And for this one, we're going to use exit, so this is going to be button exit, and our caption is going to be exit. And in a few moments, we're actually going to specify the code that these two buttons execute when we click on them. Before we do that, I'm just going to make a few other alterations to this form just to make it look nice. So we're going to click on the form, and we're going to go to pop-up. I want it to be yes. I want to make sure that various navigation selection buttons are disabled. We don't want record selectors, and we want to make sure it's in the center. Excellent. So the last couple of bits of formatting we're going to do is for these individual buttons. If we click on the run query button, we're going to set the picture caption arrangement to general, and we're going to select a picture. So if we click on the picture property and go to these three ellipses here, it'll bring up the picture builder pop-up. The picture we want is the Microsoft Access query. Where is this? There we go, Microsoft Access query. So we'll click on OK, and that adds a nice little picture to the left of our text. And we'll just put a couple of spaces in our caption, just so that it looks sensible. We'll do the same for the exit. We'll make sure that its picture caption arrangement is set to general, and we'll select our picture, and we want the picture to be the exit picture. Where is that? Actually, we'll use exit doorway. That's a nicer picture. So we'll click on OK. We'll make sure that the caption has a couple of spaces so it looks nice. And this time when we go to form view, it comes up with these nice buttons here. When we click on them, they don't do anything at the moment, but we've set up our combo boxes such that when you have the drop down, you get your unique countries, and when you get your select sex, you get your unique countries, and when you click on your date of birth, you have your date time picker. Excellent. That's exactly how we want this form to look. For now, let's just close that down to exit, and let's just make sure that we save it as well. So now that we've built our form, we're going to modify our query so that it grabs the values of the parameter from those input on the form. And we do this before we actually program the code behind the buttons on the form. So we're going to start with our query guest details query. I'm actually going to copy it rather than modify the original. So copy and paste, and we're just going to call it form. So there we go. Now we just open that up in design view. When we open it up in design view, we can see it's got the original square boxes for the parameters that we've been using. For the country, let's just remove the criteria completely. Then we're going to open up a square bracket, and we're going to start typing the word forms. And as we do that, it lists the collection of forms that are available. We just press the tab to autocomplete. Then we'll use an exclamation, and then it'll list all of the available forms. In this case, we've only got one form, which is the get guests form. Again, use the tab key to autocomplete. Again, we use the exclamation, and this time it will list all of the controls available from that form that we can use to grab our parameter values from. Now for address 3, this is the country, so we want the combo box, select country, and then just use the tab key again. We do the same with the sex, so we use square brackets, forms, exclamation, form get guests, exclamation, combo box, select sex. And for the chosen min date of birth, we'll just take the square brackets part, again, open up a square bracket, we start typing forms, use the tab key, then we use the exclamation, go to form get guests, exclamation again, and this time we want the text box for min date of birth. Okay, that's it. For now, just save that query and close it down. Now we're going to go back to our form, and we're going to program some of the VBA code behind that form so that the buttons actually run the query and exit the form. So to do this, from Microsoft Access, we use Alt and F11 to open up the Visual Basic Editor. We can see we have in the Project Explorer our hotel example project. We can see our Microsoft Access class objects, and we can see our form here, form underscore form get guests. And the reason that is there is because in design view, we specified the property of has module to be yes. So we want to view the code of this. Just right click on the object, select view code. This will bring up the VBA code module. Then we want to specify some of the button click actions. We'll start by specifying the button exit click action. We can see just when we click on this drop down box here, we can select the various controls. We select the button exit, and from the right drop down box, we can select the various actions or events related to that button. The click one was automatically selected, and that generates a shell for us where we can put our code. And the code that we're going to put in is very, very simple. It's just do command dot close, and that's it. Very straightforward. The next button that we are going to program is the run query button. So this time we select the drop down box, we go to button run query, and that will bring up the button run query click event, because the click event is the default event from the events list. And on the click event, we're going to do command dot open query. And the query that we're going to open is query name equals query guest details form, and the view that we're going to use is AC view normal, and the data mode we're going to use is AC read only. Okay, that is it. Very straightforward VBA code. So each of those click events are just doing one thing, which is running a do command, either closing the form or opening a given query. And that query is linked to the entries that we specified in the form. We can compile that, it compiles fine, we'll save it, and then we'll close the Visual Basic Editor. Okay, so we've built our form, we've linked it to our query, and we've programmed the buttons on that form. So let's just give it a test run. So if we double click on the form, up it pops. We select the country, let's select Australia. We'll select male, and let's choose a date of birth, say 17th to the 8th, 2016, but actually what we'll put in is 1980, so that we get plenty of entries returned. And then we're just going to click on run query. We run query, and it returns a number of guest details for guests who are from Australia, who are male, and who have a date of birth older than 1980. And if we just click on exit, that exits the form, and really that's it.